The A-37 Dragonfly, also known as the Supertweet, was a light attack aircraft produced by Cessna that was hastily deployed in the Vietnam War as a counter-insurgency platform. The agile machine, father to the Thunderbolt, is available as freeware for Flight Simulator. VrailleAPlat, the developer also responsible for the T-37 trainer, has honestly outdone themselves with the release of the combat version. There's a lot of software out there costing us money that honestly doesn't perform to par in comparison to what is being showcased today. With 4 pylons under each wing and large wingtip tanks, and a minigun housed in front of the right seat capable of 3,000 rounds per minute, we've got ourselves the predecessor to the A-10. Looking at performance, the Supertweet has upgraded J85 turbojet engines that produce 4,800 pounds of thrust, and despite the 12,000 pound airframe, with 2,700 being ordnance, it was still able to get airborne from smaller air bases and have a climb rate at around 6,000 feet per minute. Fully loaded, it was capable of 460 miles. However, without ordnance, it could make 1,000. Its maximum airspeed is around 441 knots, and in landing configuration will stall at around 98 knots. Although the Air Force eventually replaced them, many other countries still have them in operation, and these paint schemes can also be flown in the sim. But now, it's time for startup and a test flight around Edwards Air Force Base. Like the T-37, the developers provided us with an extensive operation manual with emphasis on how to correctly operate the J85s. Control-E won't work on this flight model. Today, I'll be using the simplified checklist to get us started. Firstly, I take the tablet from the left side and get it running. Its boot time is 1 minute and 40 seconds. Our first screen will allow us to configure our cockpit switches to be default. Randomized, as if a kid came in and messed with everything, don't recommend that, and persistent mode, which leaves all switches the way they were upon exit of the previous flight, which I find pretty cool. One can also remove the pylons to reduce weight. We'll go ahead and do that here for the purposes of maximizing capabilities. And on the second page, you can repair any failures that have occurred in the aircraft. So before we spin the engines up, don't touch your throttles, if you have FreeLook still configured to your second mouse button. The throttle levers, they're automatically set to cut off, as you can see right down here, and if you push them forward, they get set to idle, and you can't pull them back to cut off. You can get them back to cut off if you unbind the FreeLook view from your second mouse button. So I'll go ahead and do that here. If I right click on those, they go back to cut off. And then you can start the engines adequately. So now we'll go ahead and switch our battery on. And we'll go ahead and head over to our right and check our caution and warning lights. And head down to the lower quadrant and turn on any lights as required. Then let's head down here and set our inverter to spare. And take a look at our fuel gauge. And now let's go ahead and hit our left engine start button. So the left ignition light is on, and now we'll wait for 10% RPM. Once we get there, now we can push our number 1 throttle to idle. And there you can hear it spool up and ignite. Once we get to 40% RPM, we can hit that left start switch again to turn off the igniter. Check our electricity, voltmeter and load. Hydraulics are good. Engine 1 is running, and now we follow the same procedure for number 2. So we'll check our altimeter and get us ready for taxi. Let's remove our control locks, set our nose wheel steering to high, and head to the appropriate runway, which is going to be runway 5 left due to our winds being out of the east. So the startup procedure is simple in my opinion, but you do just have to be aware of that peculiarity with the RPM, the throttle quadrant fuel system down there. As you can see, I'm a pretty big fan of hangars and parking ramps that are covered. This is add-on scenery that I found on flightsim.to for Edwards Air Force Base. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description. After the last update on this aircraft, I believe the developer raised the idle RPM. So once you get this thing rolling, it tends to actually start to run away from you. So you just need to be a little bit careful with your taxi speeds. Yeah, in fact, I ran out the end of a taxiway last time I was in this thing. So here's our runway. We'll go ahead and head to the end, backtrack, and then spin us around. Get us ready to get airborne. Alright, parking brake is set. Let's do a flight control check. Flaps are set to 0, takeoff trim set, no caution lights, beacon is on, and we'll go ahead and close our canopy. Alright, so we're going to be looking for a rotation speed of about 110 knots. Cleared for takeoff. Alright, airspeed's alive. We're going to be rotating at 100 knots. Rotate. And we'll put our gear up. What you're about to see is of course not why I downloaded add-on scenery for Edwards. Although I do like flying through hangars. I just couldn't resist. So, I'm going to be taking us northwest on a flight plan that I've created to test out the A-37's flight capabilities. We'll be trying to test its limits in agility. You'll see what I mean in a couple moments. And we'll also test its climb performance and of course its stall recovery ability as well, which seems to have become a little bit of a tradition in my videos. It is worth noting that we are not supposed to be keeping our engine RPM at maximum for more than what I believe was 30 minutes as is stated in the manual, and that is if you have engine stress on. We are after all flying through the Mojave, and the first point of interest we'll be flying by is the Mojave airfield, which also contains that famous airplane graveyard some of you may have seen on TV. Or even been there in person. Unfortunately, it does not come with the Sims default scenery, so we're just going to be buzzing the tower today. Didn't really get permission to do that. So I did mention that we would firstly be testing the Dragonfly's agility out today, and I thought what better way to do that than flying through this giant wind farm. In the manual it does state not to exceed 6 Gs. Those will be the structural limits of the airframe. We'll try not to do that here. Gotta kinda take a glance at my flight plan to make sure I don't fly into those. There's literally no space. Yeah, we're gonna keep it right here. So far I noticed that, like most aircraft, the plane does slip and rolls, so applying rudder in the direction of the turn is definitely recommended. But all in all, I would say the handling capability of the Dragonfly is pretty good. It's a fun little thing to fly. I mean, it is the size of an SUV. It's pretty small. Oop, watch the power lines. One thing to note is that if you have the fuel system set to gravity feed right over here, and you flip the plane upside down, oh my gosh, I'm glad there were no power lines right there. Whoa! As I was saying, if you flip that to gravity feed, and you flip the plane upside down and you do that for, I believe, 10 seconds, your engines will suffocate. The oil systems, I believe, won't work anymore and you'll have a flame out. Alright, now it's time for a little bit of canyon bombing. Whoops. Skimmed some trees right there. We'll skim some more trees. Speaking of debris getting into the inlets of the engine cowlings or the intakes, there are actually screens on these engine intakes that you could flip up. I can show you the switch. It's actually right down there, inlet screen. If you switch that up, those screens will come up and act as barriers for debris to protect the turbines from any damage from foreign objects. I have to admit, this does remind me a lot of Top Gun Maverick. Who doesn't like running through canyons at high speed in jets? Probably one of the most fun things to do in the simulator for me. So we are a little light on this flight. I took all the pylons off and I only have the wingtip tanks filled, as well as central, left, and right wing. So gross weight is a little lighter than normal, which means our stall speed for this configuration is going to be a little bit less than the 98 knots for landing configuration. So let's go ahead and make a climb up to about 7,000 feet. And test out our stalls. Okay, power off. We're going to go ahead and initiate a power off stall. There's our alarm. Computer's telling us that we need to put the gear out. Alright, let's pitch us up to a 45-degree climb. Airspeed's falling below 100 knots. I expect the nose just to drop, and that's it. Full back on the stick. Oh, there goes the right wing. So I did keep the stick back for almost the entirety of that stall, which is why that right wing started to dip right at the end. Normally, pilot in command would already start initiating the stall recovery procedure before the wing would actually even start dropping there. So this time we're going to do a power on stall. We're going to pitch us up to 60 degrees. Speed's coming down. I'm expecting a spin this time. We'll see what happens. Alright, starting to put back pressure on the stick. And there goes the nose. Wow. That was pretty good. Now, as I've done in the last two videos testing out stalls for our flight reviews, I'm going to put us in a 30-degree bank and pretend that we're doing a base turn into the runway for our final approach. We're going to pull our throttle out and lower our gear. Alright, now we'll pull the throttle out. Pretend we got a little low, so we need to ascend, which means we're pulling back on the stick. Airspeed's below 100. There goes the left wing. And we'll go into our stall recovery. So overall, I think the stall performance on the A-37 Dragonfly is quite stable and controllable in my opinion, and it's just really a matter of keeping an eye on your airspeed on approach, in base turns for example, and maintaining safe altitude, honestly. But outside of that, it does make sense that this became a trainer aircraft for various countries outside of the US Air Force as well. Oh yeah, as a fun fact, there is, I guess, the thrilling programmed effect of the nose gun. If you just flip that switch up and pull the trigger right here, and of course arm your ordnance, Wow, even the tracers are there too. Yep. 370 rounds just went flying over the desert. Alright, so here we are on final already for runway 5 left. Should be a walk in the park. And if you find yourself doing a soft field landing, grass or gravel, this would be the moment that you would flip your inlet screen up. That thing just glides over the runway. We'll go ahead and raise our flaps and head back to our parking ramp. Wow, there's even static B-52s in this add-on scenery. Ooh, a C5. And like I mentioned earlier, you have to watch out because the idle speed of those engines get you taxing pretty fast. Per unit, this thing is, I think I read that this was 160,000 US dollars at its time of production, so it wouldn't have been that expensive to replace, but a C-17, that's a different story. Well, if you guys happen to have made it this far into the video, congratulations really, and thank you for sticking with me to the end. There was a lot to cover on the Supertweet, but it's freeware, and that's what makes it even better. Along with its trainer counterpart, it's another piece of software that I like to take out of the hangar time and time again to hop around with friends and obviously zoom through canyons. The channel has reached a big milestone this week at surpassing 100 subscribers. All I can say is a huge thank you, and I'm glad you guys are along for the ride. I'll see you in the next one. Keep the blue side up.